In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Welcome everyone to the Real Leaders Podcast. With us today is going to be Matias Obludzyner. Matias, say hello.
Hello, Kevin, and everybody. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, Matias is coming in from Argentina today, about halfway across the world. I'm here in San Diego, California, and we're here for you today. So before we begin, we just want to give you all a little update about what you're watching this podcast on and where to find the final episode after it's produced. So you're watching this on Crowdcast. It's a new live streaming social media platform. You can also watch this live on our LinkedIn. I think the cool part about Crowdcast is why I really like it is, one, it's easy to RSVP. You can put it in your calendar. You can follow us at the top here, the Real Leaders Podcast, so you can get updated and notified of more cool episodes with leaders like Matias, as well as you can chat in the box in the bottom right. So what I all want you to do is just take a look at that bottom right, send us a message, and most importantly, if you have a question for Matias, I will ask that after the show. We've asked him to hang on, and we will make sure we ask your question so you can ask him one-on-one. Also, folks, there's a link that flew in earlier. It's how to subscribe to the Real Leaders Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. Any place you listen to your podcast, we're going to be on there. There's a link that you can go on. You can subscribe. Really easy to do. I'm going to try to get this episode edited and produced by tomorrow morning. So if you have to go during this conversation, it'll be up tomorrow morning. We're going to get that done for you all. Also, if you're more of a visual learner like myself, all of these episodes are also later edited and uploaded to our YouTube channel. That link is right there for you as well. You can click on there, subscribe to our YouTube. If you're a YouTube channel person, go on there, watch all the videos. Plenty of really an abundance of leadership information on there. And sure enough, Matias will be on there as well. With that being said, folks, let's get this show on the road. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is Matias Obludzyner, the author of The Expanding Circle. Matias, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I just got done reading your book last night, The Expanding Circle, right here. Thanks for sending it over. You know, a big part of your book, Matias, was discovering your own why, connecting to your inner circle and how that connects with the outer circle. So before we dive into the book, you know, why did you feel the need to write The Expanding Circle?
That's a good question. Well, actually, look, I've been working with a number of very good leaders. I've been very lucky for a long time, many years in different global organizations, and I have had a number of very generous and good mentors, and I felt that there was something there, and there you have the book. It's like I went through all my experiences. I tried to identify what these experiences had in common, what worked, what didn't work, and I came up with a framework that could put all of them together, and that's the idea of the expanding circle.
You know, I think what would be helpful today for our audience as well, because I have read the book, to walk them through this process. So let's start with the inner circle. What do you mean by this inner circle and outer circle? What is the framework, and how do you start with one?
Yeah, I like to describe it like this. I in the book, I talk about genuine leaders. What does this mean? I describe leaders who first have a very good self-awareness. They understand themselves. It's what you were mentioning, the inner circle. Mm. They understand their values. They understand what motivates them. And this is not something just happens. It requires a lot of work. And then these people following those convictions, those values, that purpose. Also care about others and connect with others, trying to understand the other, not just like, oh, I get the other people, I am charismatic, I know what they mean, I know better. No, they take time to understand others. And that's the outer circle. And so what I say in the book is when the inner circle and the outer circle are aligned, that's when your circle, your influence expands.
Right.
Sounds easy, but it requires a lot of work. And something that I really like about this idea, and it's based on what I've seen working. This is not something that you just you are just born with this with these skills. It's something that if you are committed, if you care about your mission, your purpose, and you care about others, you can do it. But it takes a lot of time and effort.
You mentioned that quite often throughout the book, and a few case studies of people really taking some time to kind of figure out who they were. Now, this deep reflective state that one must go through to understand let's say their core values, their meaning, their why. What are some steps someone listening to this could take to start that process?
Yes. Something that I should say, this is not like a cookie cutter approach. We are talking about genuine leadership. This means that every person is different. It's about finding your own leader inside you and connecting with the specific people you are leading at that time and the specific context. And it's also about having good and solid business ideas. If you don't have the right strategy, it's not just like, oh, I know myself and that's enough. So different people will have different things that work. Some people will do coaching, some people will need meditation, some people will do journaling. And then it's not just about being with yourself, it's about going out to the world, trying to make a difference, run projects, initiatives, and see what happens. And then also when we talk about getting to understand others, it's about really engaging with others, asking questions. In the book, so we can get into the different examples, like mainly people I work, like I know like very well because I work for them for a while. And but I like a quote that I include towards the end of the book, and it's about President Obama. And so Obama is a good example of somebody, if you think about back then, 2004, when he got like very well known in the broad national political stage. He introduced himself in that 2004 convention, pretty much talking about his story. The guy wrote a book about his own story, and if you see that narrative that he then repeated for a long time, and in the 2008 campaign, he links that personal story about opportunity, diversity, with at that time with the promise of America, with the share story. Okay, but going back to the book, towards the end, I said, okay, even after what he did in 2008, towards the end of his presidency, he was traveling, I think, in Vietnam, and talking to a group of students. And the students asked, what have you learned about leadership? And he said, okay, in addition to the technical stuff, which is very, very important, it's fundamental, it's about people, and it's about listening, and it's about stories. It's about understanding their stories, what motivates them, asking questions, being curious. And this is a guy who said that after two terms being president. And if you see the different case studies, it's all people who understand their own story and also have that capacity to develop a shared narrative, a shared story that people feel included and people want to be part of that.
So understanding the core values is different for everybody. It's
Yeah,
genuine leadership. There's
yeah,
no cookie cutter formula. I like to say all the time, we have hundreds and hundreds of leaders come on the show. There's no one definition of a real leader.
yeah,
Everyone's is different. Now we go to listening. You
yes,
talked a lot about in the book the different levels of listening.
mhm, yes,
Intent, I think it was, self-listening, intent listening, deep listening. Explain to our audience why listening is such an important component of
yeah,
leadership and the
yeah,
differences between these levels.
yeah. First of all, listening it's not something passive. You are listening to me and you're asking questions. And so what we do, or yeah, we all do, I do very often, it's self-listening. You talk to somebody and you are waiting for the other person to stop talking so you can share all your wisdom. Good. And sometimes, it's fun. You go through life and it's useful. That's not the type of listening that you need to be a leader. Then there is intent listening, which is really you start like paying attention to the other. And then I talk about deep listening, and that's when you really, when you are present at the conversation, when you somehow, I don't want this to sound like very like transcendental, like it's very like concrete, but it's when you are present there, when you are curious, you're asking questions, you are really trying to understand the other person. It's like, and you are with an open mind, and you are not thinking about what you will get out of that conversation. You are trying to learn. I would say that you are with a learning mindset.
Mm.
And it takes a lot of time because we are humans. We want to talk.
There's no doubt about that, and that's been one of the hardest things to learn as a podcaster is just listening. I used to start out and I used to try to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to ask next?
Yeah,
Next?
exactly.
Like, and that freaks you out and it makes the show even worse. But if you actually listen, things come to you when you're in the moment, as you say.
You're in the moment, as you said.
We always say here in the United States when you're locked in.
Well, I couldn't hear. Sorry.
In the United States, we say when you're locked in. That's what we say. Right?
Yeah.
But so you were about to say something. I cut you off.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I was just gonna say, that it doesn't mean that if you are the host of this podcast and you're thinking what was, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. No, you are a great person. You wanted to do a good show for your audience. It's just that it takes courage to let yourself be, and it's not easy, and you need practice. And that's a little bit what I like about this expanding circle approach. It's doable. It takes practice. It's not like just you are a gifted person, you can do it. Everybody can do it, but it takes commitment. It takes practice, but you can achieve it.
Absolutely. I totally get what you're saying. And what I was trying to suggest was I used to have predetermined questions. I used to write them down and never flowed the same. So now I ask our guests, hey, I don't have any predetermined questions. We're just going to have a normal conversation, except for the last one at the end, which is what is your definition of a real leader? But for people that can't host a podcast, don't have time to do that. You said this is something you can practice. How do you practice deep listening?
Let me say something and try to answer your question, but something that I have noticed in you that I think that leads to this point. Perhaps you didn't write down all the questions and you are now thinking what I will ask this guy next, but you did your homework. I know because of the few conversations we had and how you are asking, you read the book, you try to understand the book, you try to understand what this guy from Argentina in the US is writing about communication.
What's this all about?
Okay, you did your homework. So, and that's something that I emphasize in the book with my clients. you need to do your homework. You need to know your story. You need to think about what the other person is trying to tell you. So in terms of deep listening, I would say it's practice. Sit with the other person, ask questions, check with the other person whether you are understanding it correctly. There are a number of studies that show that we are terrible, and in the book I cite like data that we are terrible at guessing what the other person actually wants, means. We assume that we know the other person better than they know themselves, and could be, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, there's like this fallacy or this projection that like communication actually happens. You can have a meeting with people, and if you're not listening or actually understanding and asking the right questions, there's communication's lost.
As a leader, check with them as a group, check with them individually, take them to a setting where they will feel comfortable. It depends a lot on the group, the kind of people, but you are talking, you are dealing with, but you're not just gonna guess because you know better.
Now let's flip this then. If I'm on the opposite side and I'm the one trying to get people to listen to me,
yes,
what are some components of my story, of my vision, of my shared vision that you would suggest these leaders listening to the show try to work on?
Yeah. Well, first, I mean, what you're saying about communications, this book is about leadership, but I would say it's about leadership and communications, which are like the two things that I do with my clients, and how you communicate as a leader. The first thing, and I don't want to go back and back and back, but it's a fact, is listening and thinking what you want to say before you speak. But then, as we said, first, when you talk about your inner circle, getting to know, understand yourself, there is also a personal story. Let's say personal/professional story. Here, we are not talking, this is not therapy. We are not talking, therapy can help to many people, but here we are talking about professional settings. And as a professional, you have a story, and you need to, and you can have actually more than one story. We have different aspects, even professionally. Okay, you need to having that personal story and being able to share that. It's very important because helps other people to make sense, to absorb who you are, what you want, why you are engaging with them. It's not about just throwing like data or pieces, data points of what you've done, and no. You have, as human beings, we learn by storytelling. So it's about being able to share that story. And if that story is genuine, people see that. And that creates trust. So we have that story. Will help other people to make sense of who you are as a person, as a leader, and also will create trust. That's the first part. And then, as part of the outer circle, as I say in the book, is developing that shared narrative, shared story. Actually, in the book, I make a difference. I don't want to get in the book, I said one thing is the narrative, and then you have many stories that respond to that narrative. It's like the umbrella. It's like for a company to have like a brand. It has like, it gives you an experience, but then it has different products. The same happens with the communications. So going back to the store, how to communicate, it's important to be able to craft that shared narrative. That, by the way, you do that interacting with others. And once you put that in place and people embrace that shared narrative, that's when people, I feel that they belong, and that's when people will go the extra mile.
Matias, now here was the thing I was thinking about while you were saying that the inner circle. There's in your book put out some framework.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the challenge you ran into? What's the why? What were the choices you made? How'd you get over this challenge? What's the outcome that you
Yeah.
would in this genuine way? And then how that pertains also to
Yeah.
the outer circle in the shared narrative. It's very similar concepts. Now, for someone listening to this in an organization that they're not the founder of, they didn't
Yes.
originally, the idea of the company did not originate from them.
Mhm.
If they're going to go through this workshop, how do they conjoin a shared narrative if they're maybe on the outside and the founder is on the inside?
Yeah. I thought about that in working on the book a lot. And if you see, so who I write about in the book, I write about, I work for more than 10 years for the World Bank. And I advise the leadership of the World Bank. But many of the people I feature in the book, they were not the president of the World Bank. They were not, they were like upper middle level directors, managers. They had like big departments, like 100, 200 people, but they were part of the bureaucracy of thousands of people. So they didn't call all the shots. And so this idea of connecting with yourself, connecting with the others, applies at all levels, I would say. And then we can talk even for people who don't run any teams. In the book, I also feature people who are like just starting, not starting, but young, talented professionals who are just starting, or they are in the middle of their careers, if you want, but they are not established leaders. Right. So I don't know. Please tell me. I'm not sure I'm responding to answering your question, but what I'm trying to say is that it applies. You don't have to be the founder to connect with yourself and connect with others. And actually, it's important that as a leader that in that shared narrative, you take into account the context. You have a lot of constraints. It can be a founder, and even if you're the founder, you have investors, you have a board. You are never like alone in the game.
Okay, so maybe the question was prefaced in a different way. I was more thinking of a brand script, more of a way to tell the story of your company
Yes.
with your inner values as the leader of that organization now. So if I am a mid-level manager,
Yes.
and I am trying to, I've done the workshop of my inner circle. I'm now am trying to create a shared vision,
Yes.
but that shared vision may not correlate with the same intention of the company that I'm working for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens a lot, and big bureaucracies or big complex organizations, and that's why it's not that easy to make this happen. And so when we talk about engaging with others, you have to engage with your team, and you have to engage you have to manage up and you have to manage down, and I would say it doesn't always work. If your inner values and convictions and don't fit with the organization, it's like sometimes you can change that and sometimes it doesn't. In the book, actually, I describe stories of people who have been. I talk about Fabian Kos, a leader who started up at the Inter-American Development Bank, that it's like the World Bank but focused on Latin America. On Latin America, he started up the youth program. There was nothing when he started, and he traveled all around Latin America, picked like social entrepreneurs and creating a network, and he managed we are talking about mid-90s, mid-90s, and he was like for 15 years working on this. And he managed to mainstream the idea that it's very important for development projects to invest in youth. And once he felt that once that was mainstream, it didn't matter how successful he had been. He felt that he didn't, I wouldn't say he didn't belong it, but he felt like he had to leave, and he left and he started up another company. What I'm trying to say is that you have to make choices, and when you get know yourself, you have a choice, and to really make a difference, perhaps you need to change places.
Yeah, I think I prefaced that the wrong way. It was more for the overall brand. When in reality, it's just being a genuine leader. For anything that comes up in your organization, no matter where you are, whether it's a campaign, whether it's a sales initiative, whether it's a challenge, a constraint that comes in your way, reflecting inward and then understanding who you are and where you want to take this project is something to convey to your outer circle, which really is a strong bond. Now, the storytelling framework.
Yes.
What are some questions people should be asking themselves?
Yes.
To depict, to kind of extrapolate their story and then convey it in a way that makes sense to someone on the outside.
Yes.
Deconstruct.
Yes, it's a good question. There is a Harvard professor who talks about 3 stories. And I take these ideas for the book, so I will try to explain as he explains it. He talks about a story of self, story of us, story of now. So he says the first thing is to be able to tell who you are, where you go, what you care about. And you have to ask those questions to yourself in relation to the challenge that you have ahead of you. And then connect that with the team, the story of us. Explain how what you are going through, what you care about is relevant for the group. And the third part leads to the strategy. This is not just about telling a good story. It needs to lead to a good business idea or team strategy. And then you have to explain why it's important to take action now. Yeah. So first, I would say for each of these stories, you need to understand what's the challenge that you or your team are facing. What are the options you have? And trying to connect like how you feel when you talk about your story, which usually is something that already happened. It's like try to connect with how you felt when you made that decision. And then what was the outcome? And what is the learning that you want to share with others? And then when you get into the story of us, the story why this is relevant for all of us is probably forward-looking. And you get into the same, what's the challenge that we have as a team? The organization is not like really, the organization is not really valuing what we do, and we need to show why what we do is so important, so fundamental for the organization. Yeah. Right. So that's the challenge. What are the options that we have? We just keep doing what we've been doing all this time and just get the salary, but there might be consequences. Another CEO might say, I will get rid of that department. Or we will revisit how we work and what's the value. We will engage with our internal clients and we will revisit what's the value we bring to this organization. And that requires more work. Will require get out of our comfort zone. And okay, so that's a story that we need to put together, all of us. And then the story of now, why we have to do now that. I mean, it might depend on the context of the organization. So going back to the story of myself, it would be very nice for a manager to share with his or her team a similar situation that he went through, a struggle he went through as a professional. Let's say when he felt that he was not taken seriously and he reconverted himself. Okay, now this is something that the whole team is facing. And we need to do it now because there is a new CEO and he's not happy with our performance.
So it seems like when one clarifies their why, the ultimate why, it makes it easier for the whole to make decisions and to make choices based on that why. Is that what
Absolutely. I'm saying this kind of genuine leadership is gonna be, it's very relevant today. Genuine leaders are especially well positioned to make a difference now. And I'm saying in the decade ahead, even more. And I started writing this book. I wrote this book during COVID, but I started right before. So I had this idea, and then I realized COVID is actually, it's even intensifying this idea of we live in an uncertain world, a changing world. You cannot, as a leader, you cannot foresee everything that is going to happen in a complex organization. You cannot micromanage everything. So, but if you can share that why and share and show how it matters to you as a leader personally, and it matters, and you articulate that in a way that matters for the entire team, then people can make their own decisions, but they understand the shared purpose, the direction, the why, as you are saying. I really like that idea of the why.
So taking time to do some deep reflection, listening and understanding others, and that really is what facilitates this, the connections, the building the trust, the storytelling aspects of things, building those connections, the inner circle and the outer circle. When those are aligned, it creates more expanding circles. I'm there now. Now, one of the other things I felt was an ongoing theme throughout this book with all of the case studies. They talked a lot about accountability and ownership. How important is that for a leader to have within its own organization?
The short answer is very important. If it's paramount, if you are not accountable in front of your team or your partners, your clients, they are not going to trust you. And you might be like another kind of leader and might work, but this kind of genuine leadership in which it's all about trust, if you don't acknowledge, if you are not accountable for what you do, and sometimes it means acknowledging that you got it wrong, but showing that you care and you are learning, that trust doesn't happen. One of the stories in the book, it's about the Diego Beckerman. Diego is the manager for Latin America of Microsoft, and he didn't start as the manager for the region. He started as director, actually, the title, but it doesn't matter. He started in like a middle level manager for Argentina, and even before that, like it was like middle level manager, and he tells a story when like it was in the middle of the crisis, like 2007-8 crisis. You know, the world was falling apart, and now we think that it was nothing compared to today's situation, but at that time, so all the banks going south, and he came up with a co-investment approach for small and medium-sized businesses. It doesn't matter right now, like the technical approach that he came up with, but it really worked in a country like Argentina, also quite unstable, and so he got like called, he and his team, like to corporate awards, all those things that happen in big corporations, and they were like up there. And then things changed, and he, as a leader, didn't foresee that things would change. And when he was young, very young for his position, and what the approach he took was like to point fingers, to try to find who was responsible for the different mistakes, and shuffle people around. And then he realized over time that no, he needed to take responsibility, and it was not just a process he himself went through. There was this other part of talking to others and acknowledging what he didn't do right, and apologizing, and that made himself like the boss he is now, and people really appreciate him, and people really trust him. And I tell in the book another story. When he got it wrong, just in a much higher position, he got it wrong, but his approach was different. He went to his team, his leadership team, his staff, and he acknowledged that, and people supported him. People had his back because he was accountable for what he had done.
I found that to be a really interesting story too. This is right when the political regimes change in Argentina, right?
Yeah, there was an election, and so before the election there was a let's say a business friendly
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't do very well, to be honest, but at least in theory it was business friendly administration. Most analysts thought that they would win, and they didn't, and so a government with more like a populist approach came to power, and so that change for businesses changed the entire logic. And imagine like a company like Microsoft, it's like okay, we didn't see it. I mean, they are just fine, but yes, it was at that time. And the fact that somebody who holds that position in a company like Microsoft is
interesting.
To talk about these things, it tells me something about the courage that they have to understand themselves, learn from what they do right and from what they don't do right. They do and engage based on that with others. And this is a very successful guy. And this is not. We are not talking about we are talking about the business person.
Right. Well, Matias, I think what's interesting is this person was able to talk about this. Yes.
Yes.
Leadership is something that I've heard many times. It can't be taught. Why can't it be taught? Well, because you have to experience failure. You have to go through this. You have to let people fail. And so, he had another example in the book with the woman who was in charge of faculty at that university, and then was just right before
Rachel Pike, Fletcher School.
And you brought the point of what could go wrong. Why aren't we having those conversations? Why aren't we planning for things like that? What advice would you give to people listening to this who haven't thought about failure?
People who haven't thought about failing?
Haven't thought about failing.
Well, as a leader, I think that you should, and it's never late to start doing it. And it's not about just doing it yourself. It's about engaging with your team. I'm being very generic in what I'm saying, but so the same. It's about like connecting with yourself, understanding what can go wrong, like how you think that you would feel, but about that, but also connecting with others. And if you create this trust that we are talking all the time with your team, with your clients, and especially with your team, they will go the extra mile and they will tell you what can go wrong. If you don't, and it's just because you have the authority, you pay, you do the performance review, they will just look at, like, wait for you to fail, and then there will be another boss. I think that a little bit, actually, it's a very good question, because a little bit of what's behind being a genuine leader is this idea that you will have their back and they will have your back. And there is no way in today's world that you will know everything that can go wrong. And so you need your team to tell you.
Matthias, what about gratitude? Have you thought about gratitude being a value of importance in leadership? What are your thoughts on gratitude being instilled in the culture?
I like the question. I don't think that you just read the book, so correct me if I don't think that I talk about gratitude in that way in the book, but I really I think that it's part of what we are discussing, right? It's about acknowledging others and being grateful for what other people give you, the trust they give you. In the book, I talk about. I also talk a little bit about how to career development as part of this idea of becoming your own genuine kind of leader. And I talk a lot about, like, having the mentors and learning from others. And I think that what's behind about that, it's like, appreciate them, what they are giving you. And so I think that it's difficult for me to think about the genuine leaders who is not grateful.
Now, would you rather have a culture of ownership or a culture of gratitude?
When you say ownership, you mean?
Would you rather have the employees in your company thinking about the why for the decisions that they make taking ownership, or would you rather have about the decisions they make about being grateful? And the reason I asked, you can think about this one. I was reading this book, and accountability was a big part of this. Ownership was a big part of this. Philosopher of Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, big part of that book. Had a guest on the show who wrote the book Leading with Gratitude, and that was a big message, how all these businesses, the common theme was gratitude. So I kind of say, okay, is it gratitude, is it ownership? Obviously they intertwine, but what would you rather have?
Well, I was going to say that they can perfectly go together. I don't see, and I mean, ownership definitely is a very big point. You want your team to feel ownership, and actually, as I show in the book, like there are a lot of studies that show that especially new generations, they want to feel ownership and feel purpose on what they do. And I see that gratitude can go together with the ownership, and ideally, I would like to have the two things in an organizational culture. I do think that the gratitude has to start from the leader, if you want. If not, it's so people need to feel appreciated and valued.
Well, for people listening out there, if they've been doing a good job of deep listening today throughout today's episode, they'd understand that they have to go home, do some homework, think about their own values, and with whatever way that they do that. This is genuine leadership. This is in your own right. And also learning to listen more clearly, to listen deeper, to be more intentional about these things, and to take time to then ask your own questions. And then lastly, to expand the circle. Having that shared vision that people can coalesce around and can form their own vision and have that shared why is something that really unites and builds that meaningful connection. We talked about those three principles really throughout this entire episode today, Matias. So the last question I have for you today is this: what is your definition of a real leader?
Yeah. I would like to go with the idea of a genuine leader, somebody who is truly tune in with herself or himself, with the others, and I could say with the world around them.
I love that. Matias, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sending over this wonderful book, folks. You can find it on Amazon as well as Matias's website. And by the way, what is that website?
It's matioblu.com, matioblu.com. And there you will learn a little bit about myself, that I advise like leaders and high potential like professionals on leadership, organizational development, and communications. You will find information about the book, and please reach out, and I'm looking forward to connecting with the audience of this show. And Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to dig into the book, talking to me. I really appreciate it, and a pleasure. I hope we can talk again like very soon.
It meant a lot for you to reach out. I'm glad you watched the show and felt the need to reach out. And I'm glad you sent the book over. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And folks, it's a quick read. I'd highly recommend it. And it's something that I'll probably be going back to look at, during this reflection stage. Also, folks, if you want to reach out as well, just send us an email, b@real-leaders.com. That's be@real-leaders.com. Send me a note if you want to come to the show, or if you have a guest that you'd like to see as well. Matias, thank you so much for coming on. Hope you hang around to answer a few questions after the show. But for Matias Obludzyner, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, lead in a genuine way, folks, and always keep it real. Thanks, Matias. All right, good people. Thanks for hanging on Crowdcast and on LinkedIn. We had one question fly in. Don't be shy, folks. Don't be shy. Ask your question in the chat box in the right for Matias to answer after the show, or else I'm going to have to come up with a few more to keep you all entertained, and that's difficult to do. I'm exhausted here, Matias. It's 47 minutes into the episode already. You spent me out. All jokes aside here, we got a first question coming in from one of the fans, and Matias, she says, "Thank you for your valuable insights. Given that we're a global society, what advice or thoughts would you give to help people communicate more effectively with each other and keep respected cultural etiquette in mind?"
Okay, that's a good question. I can say that I address that in the book. There is a chapter about that. Just a little bit to put this in context. I'm originally from Argentina. I've been living in the US like for 15 years. I'm now in this gap year with my wife, who is American, and my son, who is American in Argentina, but I live in the US. So it's like the entire thing of being in a different culture has been very central to a big part of my life. And I done most of my career in international organizations, most of it in the World Bank. And I work with like leaders from everywhere. I mean, and it's the definition of the World Bank. And so in the book, I say, and again, this is not like a cookie cutter, something that will work for any leader in any situation. But in the book, I try to distill what I've seen that it works, and I put like three steps that make sense in the context of this framework. The first one is to have clarity about your inner circle, what you want to achieve, what's the purpose of you going to a different culture and communicating. The second one is, I'm being very fast in my answer. I'm happy to get deeper. The second one is listening. And as Kevin was saying during the show, there are like three types, three levels. It's self, you just listen to yourself. Intent listening, you start like paying more attention. And when you achieve like deep listening, you really get to be present and see what really motivates the other person. So good leaders move between 2 and 3, I would say. And the third one, and it's like, don't be don't be afraid of having your own team of advisors. I say it's and I have had it myself. I was a communications specialist, like I am, like for years and years, and I'm not a native speaker, and most of my work has been in English. The book is in English, and but what did I do, or what I suggest that people do, and it's like surround yourself with people who can help you, who understand that culture, who can be bridges, who can, even if it's a different language, of course, you might need it, but even if it's your same language, and that happens a lot, like English is the business language, but even if that happens, like there are cultural differences. I used to have a boss who, before going to a new country, she would spend time in Washington, D.C. headquarters with somebody from that country. And then once she would get to that country, before engaging with clients, she would spend time with the local staff to have a better sense of what was happening. So having clarity about what you want to say, what you want to achieve, and listening, and building your own team of advisors.
Matias, at the end of the book, you said we need genuine leadership now more than ever. What do you mean by that, and why do you think it's so important now?
Well, if you see the world we are in, it's like it's changing, it's uncertain. You can see, especially in younger generations, people crave purpose, and genuine leaders, I think that they're very well positioned to really empower people to foster, to mold that shared purpose. I think that the challenges that businesses face and different like organizations in this world are very big. So we need people to create that space for what many people are looking for, which is purpose. People want to be part of, want to make a difference, and so it's up to the leaders also to work with them and create that space.
It's a common theme that we've been seeing throughout all of these interviews on the earliest podcast. So half of the book, I was just smiling, just going, "Yep, definitely."
Something that, if we have a few minutes, something that I've been like reading as a criticism to this kind of approach. Some people talk about authentic leadership. I talk about genuine leadership. But some people say, well, that doesn't work. I mean, it sounds good, but you can connect with yourself. So you're a jerk. You go around like bossing around people, shouting, and you're being yourself. So you are authentic. You are genuine. That's okay. If you read the book, you know that's not genuine leadership. It's not actually, yes, it's connecting with yourself, but it's even more important. The two go together, but it's even more important about connecting with others, understanding others, what they want, and connecting with them in a way that you're not faking it. And if you cannot do that connection, well, perhaps you are not the leader for that crowd. Perhaps that doesn't motivate you. And then the other thing that I say is like, this is a complement to a good business strategy. If you don't have the strategy to lead a team, to create a business, to run a community, it doesn't matter that you are very genuine. It's not. But when you're genuine and you make a mistake, people probably will want to back you up, will give you a second chance. I just thought that it would be worth saying this because I've read a few articles like criticizing this kind of genuine leadership.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, someone comes to mind when you say that. And I think there was another example in the book about the 80-20 rule that the woman shared. And it's like, 80% of the people you most likely are going to be able to connect with, at least in some way, shape, or form, if you're honest with them. And then the 20% that you can't, you just show them you're as tough as they are. And I thought that was a really good quote, and a great way to look at people and understand where the opposite side, if people don't like you or not, and look at yourself as well.
Yeah, you're talking about like Rachel Kite. Now she's the dean of the Fletcher School of like international relations and stuff. But she's such a. I hope that at some point you can have her in your show.
I would love to. Yeah,
she's such a personality. She started being a social and environmental activist, and she's not like she's tough. I mean, good luck working for her. She's very demanding. She's tough, and she got in the world of being like she comes from a working class, like in England, but she got in the world of international organizations. She really got to the very top, but she continued being an activist. She says, once you are an activist, you are always an activist. And believe me, she was. Her job was to shake big, complex organizations to be more genuine, let's say. And yes, I'm saying this because it's like you can be how to say, you can be aligned with who you are, in this case an activist, and be a genuine leader, and it doesn't mean that you will be all like love and peace. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have the many social entrepreneurs on the show all the time. Many of them start out as activists, or were in corporate, working for a big four, like Laura Hertz at Gifts for Good. She was doing a lot of nonprofit work, and just saw a dire need for nonprofits to have a sales arm and create a for-profit business model that people really can align their values with, especially their employees. It's that their employees are much more engaging, like you mentioned before. They're finding more purpose in their work. It's a great form of leadership, and I think it's exemplified throughout the expanding circle. So Matias, just want to appreciate you coming on the show today. Thanks for coming on the show again. It's MatiasObludzyner.com. The book is The Expanding Circle. So thank you, Matias, and thank you, good people, for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast with Matias Obludzyner. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And folks, again, if you want to stay connected, make sure you subscribe to the Real Leaders Podcast. There's a link at the top there. Just hit that link and make sure you are notified of tomorrow's release with Matias when it's all edited and cleaned up. Also, if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, make sure you go to LinkedIn. Just type in Real Leaders. We post many stories every single day, as well as live stream these interviews to the entire world. This episode will also be uploaded in a video format to our YouTube channel, along with all of our other episodes. So make sure you go on there, subscribe, and never miss an episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Matias, thank you so much again for coming on the show. Stay warm there in Argentina, and always, folks, keep it real.